Yo, what's going on guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's Bertrude and today we're using the most terrifying build roaming the lands between. This is Bloody Mary. Our stats are a bit all over the place on this one. We're a level 80 build, we've got 39 vigour, 18 strength, 14 dex, 14 faith and 35 arcane. We're using the Opaline hard tier for the damage negation and the faith knot for our incantations, and then here's a quick look at the armour and talismans we're using on the build. We'll be using both spells and incantations on this one, so in our left hand we've got the Staff of the Guilty plus the plain old Finger Seal. All of our weapons on the build are blood infused, and first off we've got the Celebrant Skull. I absolutely love this weapon and it's a perfect fit for the build. Next up we also have a broadsword, and then the final main weapon on the build is a single Scavenger's Curve Sword. Also on the build, in our second weapon slot, we also have the option to use the Reduvia. And don't forget, this build is the ultimate Blood Mage, so we will be using all of the bleed spells and the bleed incantations that are available. And that's the build guys. It's an absolutely terrifying one, really fun playstyle. And yeah, it's just Bloody Mary. Really good build. Anyway guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, but it's time for you lot to sit back and enjoy the video. So we're in the shaded castle for our first invasion. Let's see what Bloody Mary can do against this duo. As you can see, we're using both spells and incantations on the build, which is why we've got the seal and the Staff of the Guilty. It also means that our stats are a little bit all over the place. It's a bit of a funky stat spread, but it has to be to accommodate the build and everything that I wanted to use. Is it absolutely working at its most efficient at this level? Who knows, maybe if I took this build up to a higher level and kind of evened out some of my stat spread, it would be more effective. But I don't know, I've debated with this build a lot about taking it up to higher levels, but at the moment I think I'm just happy to stick with it at this level. It's getting a little bit tricky, like this build at this level, with some of the summons that we're fighting, the over level summons, some of the ganks that this build has been going up against, it's been difficult, you know, it's been a bit tricky, but for now I think I'm happy to just leave it as it is. I think changing this build and making it, you know, putting it up to a higher level would change the core fundamental feel of the build, and that's not really what I want to be doing. Like some of my other builds that I have changed, I've known that it was the right thing to do. I've known that it was right to change them, but with this one I'm really not sure. I'm just really tempted to just stick it out and like maybe do a few more sessions with it, see how it feels, and then if it's still feeling a little bit underpowered or a little bit susceptible to ganks, maybe then I will look at changing it. But for now I'm happy with it. It's Bloody Mary. She's absolutely terrifying, and yeah, let's just see how we do in this invasion. You can see, hats off to this host, stood back for that whole fight and let me and the summon just go at it. Really big respect to this guy for doing that. You know, he stood back, just enjoyed the show, enjoyed the fight, didn't gank, didn't jump in to try and save his buddy. We had a really good one-on-one scrap there, and now the horse steps up to see if he's got what it takes. Let's see how he gets on in this one. One-on-one, we took care of his summon. Now it's me and the host. So this is obviously one of my builds that leans heavily more into the character and the persona of the build, much more so than the playstyle. I mean, don't get me wrong guys, the playstyle on this one is absolutely integral to the build, but it was a character that came first. It was a character that gave me the initial idea to put this build together. We all know the name Bloody Mary. It's deep down in the darkest corners of our minds. It's the thing that keeps us up at night. It's a thing that puts a chill on the back of your neck when you're walking down a dark corridor. Do you know what I mean? It's just a name that strikes fear into the hearts, and it's integral to our childhoods. It's something that we're all kind of aware of. The name Bloody Mary. We all know what and who it is and what the crack is. We've all been to that childhood sleepover You know, when you was in your teens and someone's dared you to go and say your name 3 times into the mirror. You know, we all got to the second one, but we all lost our bottle by the third one, didn't we? We all lost our bottle and run home crying with our tails tucked between our legs because we got too scared to say it 3 times, and then we couldn't sleep for the next week because we were scared Bloody Mary was going to turn up in our room. Of course we all did. Of course we all did that. And that is why we all know the name Bloody Mary. It's just part of our, you know, it's part of our DNA, it's part of our makeup. It's like saying Freddy Krueger or, you know, Michael Myers. We all know the name Bloody Mary. So the character and the whole kind of feeling of this build, it was already there. It was just there, ready and waiting. It was there, ready to have some life breathed into it and brought to life in the lands between. It just needed a body and some weapons to put on it and some fashion, and then it was ready to go out into the lands between and start claiming some victims. Using that fear that we all know, it was ready to take it out into the lands between and start causing havoc. So it was just a case of putting it all together and developing the playstyle, and it was just ready to go. I had the idea of Bloody Mary floating around for a while, so I knew I wanted to make the character, I knew I wanted to put the build together, and the next thing that came after that was the armour. So I had the idea first, and then I started thinking about armour sets. What would look good for the character Bloody Mary? In terms of the robe, we're using the Travelling Maiden's robe, and I just think it looks so awesome. The way it moves while I'm moving around on screen, the way the robes flow around as we're doing our rolls and we're doing our attacks, the way it just droops off our shoulders, there's just something really ominous looking about it. It's got that kind of off red colour, that kind of dirty, bloody look. It looks like a witch's robe, you know, it just looks absolutely perfect. And then the mask that we're using, the headpiece, is the Zamor mask. Now, as much as I love the robes on this build, the Travelling Maiden's robes, I think the Zamor mask is just, you know, absolutely spot on. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I wouldn't change the mask on this build for anything. I think you could probably interchange the robes with maybe 2 or 3 other robe sets in the game, and as long as we're still wearing the mask, it would still keep the same feel. I actually think like this is what Bloody Mary would look like. I think the mask for this build is that perfect. It's that good of a fit. I mean, I'm not walking around every day thinking like, what does Bloody Mary look like? You know, I'm not a complete weirdo. I don't think about Bloody Mary all the time, but when I'm using this build and it's kind of in the forefront of my mind, and I am thinking about that kind of thing because, you know, the character's Bloody Mary. This is what I picture. Every time I think of Bloody Mary now, if I ever hear her name in a film or anything, this is what I think she looks like. I just think it fits so well. In terms of our gauntlets and our greaves, we're using the Banished Knight's greaves, and the gauntlets are the Banished Knight's gauntlets. They can be changed. They're not really integral to the build. We can use whatever we want for those pieces. It's more about the robes and the headset. In fact, I do change the gauntlets sometimes. When I'm using the Celebrant Skull, it's a little bit heavier. So I have to change some of the gauntlets and maybe our greaves up as well, just to accommodate for the extra weight of the Celebrant Skull. But that doesn't really matter. Besides changing our poise ratings a little bit and our defences and stuff, nothing changes. It's all about the robes and the headset on this one. And like I said, they're the main aspects of the whole look of this build, and it's kind of what brought the build together in terms of giving it life, and then really kind of pushing things forward. I got the character down, I got the fashion down. We had the build ready. It was just now a case of developing a playstyle, putting some weapons on it, deciding was it going to be an out-and-out bleed build with our weapons, or was we going to make it into like a Blood Mage, use some of the incantations and spells. So that was what was coming next. From the very start, I knew that this build was always going to be a bleed build. How could it not be? How could Bloody Mary ever be anything else except a bleed build? It would just have been a complete disservice to the character. Could you imagine Bloody Mary running around with the cestus and just like running up to people and punching them, or running around with a big colossal weapon, swinging this big heavy slow weapon at people. It just wasn't right. It was always going to be a bleed build when it came to Bloody Mary. It was just going to be a case of whether it was going to be a weapons based bleed build or whether it was going to be more of a Blood Mage using the spells and using the incantations. And for me it was quite a simple choice. It was always going to be the Blood Mage. It was the spells and the incantations that kind of give me some of the inspirations initially for the build, as well as, you know, the fashion and stuff. I always knew that it was going to be a Blood Mage. It was also just a case of whether I was going to use the Briars of Sin and the Briars of Punishment, or I was going to just stick to the incantations using the Swarm of Flies, the Blood Boon and the Blood Flame Talons. Now I did just play around with the incantations initially, and don't get me wrong, those incantations are very good. But I tried Briars of Sin and Briars of Punishment. By the way guys, just keep an eye on this invasion in the background. What an absolute shambles this is. I mean, look at this spell spam from the horse in the background. This is going to be a real tough one if we can actually pull anything out of this invasion, but just keep your eyes on it. It might surprise you. This is a bonkers invasion, just crazy. But yeah, as I was saying, I decided to use the spells and the incantations just because it's so fun. Like the Briars of Sin and the Briars of Punishment are just such fun spells to use. They're so stylish, and I think like mixing it all in together with the incantations and the spells, it's just perfect for the build. I mean, Bloody Mary, I imagine her as this witch character. She's like supernatural. It just makes sense to have her as a Blood Mage rather than a weapons based bleed build. And as I said, you know, it kind of sends our stats a little bit funky. We've got to accommodate with a bit of arcane in there, some faith, and then obviously everything we need strength and dex wise to accommodate the weapons. So it sends our stats all over the place, but I just had to do it guys. The build just demanded it. It's such a fun playstyle, mixing all of the spells and the incantations together. We've got to switch between our staff and our seal depending on what we need for the situation, what spells we're using. The staff boosts the damage and the seal boosts... no, the seal doesn't, sorry, I take that back. But the staff boosts the damage of the Briars of Sin and the Briars of Punishment. So we're using the right staff for the job. And it's just a really fun playstyle. When we start mixing it all together and we're mixing the Ashes of War in between all of our spells and incantations, it just makes it really fun. It's a really fun one, and I honestly wouldn't have it any other way at this point. This build has gone through a few minor changes along the journey of getting it to where it is now. Initially it was at a lower level. I think when I first made the build it was at level 50 or 60 possibly, and it just felt a little bit weaker. I weren't actually using arcane at that point as well. I decided to have it as a heavy build, believe it or not. All of our stats that are in arcane at this point now, all of our spur stats were in strength, and I was actually using Blood Flame Blade to add the bleed aspect to our weapons. So I was using the same spells, the same incantations, but when it came to our weapons, the weapons weren't blood infused. I was using Blood Flame Blade to put that kind of red shiny glow on the blade. You know the one, it's Blood Flame Blade, it's a very popular spell, but I was using that to add the bleed aspect to the weapons. But it just didn't feel very strong at that point. It felt under leveled, you know what I mean? I knew it weren't at the right level to be really competing or really kind of making the most out of the whole kit and stuff. So it went through a few changes. I tried it at level 70 I think, and then just recently I've added 10 more levels onto it, and here we are, we're up at level 80, and I respect and all of the spur points that were in strength I put into arcane, and then I changed the weapons to blood infused, and I got rid of the Blood Flame Blade. I just thought, it's Bloody Mary, it's a bleed build, I've just got to commit to the character, commit to the playstyle, and I've just got to go with the arcane. There's nothing wrong with that. Just go, commit to the arcane, and just have it as an out and out bleed build. Get rid of the heavy infusions, and it really did start to help when it came to proccing the blood on people and getting some big damage. It helped our spells, helped our incantations, and it was just the right thing to do for the build. Looking at this build now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm still not 100% sure this is where this build will be staying. It's just going to be a case of play it by ear, see how things are feeling. This build performs much better in one-on-one situations. As you'll see in this invasion, we've got the horse sitting back again just watching the show, and it's me and this summon going at it one-on-one. And we handle it pretty well, you know. This guy's got a tricky setup, he's switched to the dual spears. And you'll see just how well we actually handle this invasion against a horse who is poised up. He's got a good kit. And this build just performs really well one-on-one. As you can see, we just took care of that summon now. The horse jumps down for another one-on-one, and you'll see how well we perform against him as well. It's just not as good when it comes to ganks. It struggles in that situation. You know, our poise isn't amazing, our defences aren't amazing, but I don't think that's what it is. I'm just not sure. I think it's just the state of the game now. Some builds between levels 60 and 80, builds that felt okay earlier at a point, now seem to be struggling a little bit with some of the horrendous ganks that we're going up against. Lower levels, I'd say level 30 to 50 can still feel relatively good, and obviously builds at higher levels feel fine because everyone's doing major damage anyway, it doesn't really matter. But I'd say builds around 60 to 80, all of a sudden they seem to be struggling a little bit. I think if you're invading at level 60 to 80, you really have to have your build spot on. You can't have so much of these quirky builds running around in this level range at the moment. The ganks that we're facing, the weapons that people are using, it's just a bit much. But this build, it's kind of in a little bit of a limbo situation. I love it, I love the build. The build isn't going to change in terms of the kit, the look, the playstyle. It's just going to be a case of, in the future, do I increase the level? But time will tell, and we'll see how it goes. But I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. Little insight into the whole kind of creation of Bloody Mary. She's one of my favourite builds, guys. I absolutely love her. She's brilliant. One of my standout builds. But anyway, look after yourselves, guys. Look after each other. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. And I'll see you all on the next video.